हाय एवरीवन, वेलकम बैक टू माय चैनल। सो कैसे हैं आप सब? आई होप आप सब अच्छे होंगे। सो आज की वीडियो में हम बात करने वाले हैं फंडामेंटलिज्म के बारे में। ओके, सो विदाउट एनी फर्दर डू लेट्स गेट स्टार्टेड। देखो, जब हम फंडामेंटलिज्म यानी कट्टरवाद की बात करते हैं तो इसमें अपने रिलीजन कल्चर के लिए आज के समय में आप देख रहे होंगे कई तरीके की कट्टरपंथी सोच ज़्यादा देखने को मिलती है। देखो, मॉडर्न स्टेट में अलग अलग रिलीजन कल्चर के लोग रहते हैं, सबकी सोच अलग अलग होती है। ठीक है, सब अपने कल्चर और रिलीजन के अस्तित्व को बनाए रखने के लिए कट्टरवाद को आज की डेट में बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ावा दिया जा रहा है। एंड्रयू हेविड की एक बुक है जिसका नाम है पॉलिटिकल आइडियोलॉजी। उन्होंने अपने बुक में दो बातों को सबसे ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंस दी है। फर्स्ट, उन्होंने क्या कहा है, फंडामेंटलिस्ट जो होते हैं वो बेसिकली फंडामेंटल रूल्स में बिलीव करते हैं, यानी कि मौलिक नियमों में विश्वास करते हैं। सेकंड, कमिटमेंट टू फेथ के लिए बहुत ज़्यादा वो कमिटेड रहते हैं। जो भी उनका विश्वास होता है, जो भी वो मान के चले आ रहे होते हैं, वो उन चीज़ों में बहुत ज़्यादा बिलीव करते हैं। ओके, देखो, जो कट्टरवादी मेंटालिटी के लोग होते हैं वो बेसिकली सेक्युलरिज्म के अगेंस्ट होते हैं और ह्यूमैनिटी के भी अगेंस्ट होते हैं। देखो, जो फंडामेंटलिज्म होते हैं वो बेसिकली क्या करते हैं, सिविल सोसाइटी को टुकड़ों में बांटने की कोशिश करते हैं, जिससे क्या होता है, लोग एक दूसरे के दुश्मन बन जाते हैं और वायलेंस क्रिएट करने लग जाते हैं। ओके, देखो, एक कट्टरवाद अपने धर्म को अपने ही फायदे की नजरों से देखता है और इसी वजह से कभी कभी वो अपने ही धर्म की डिसरिस्पेक्ट कर देता है। ये बेसिकली देखा जाता है जब कोई भी बहुत ज्यादा कट्टरवाद होता है। तो जो रिलीजियस फंडामेंटलिज्म होते हैं, यानी कि धार्मिक कट्टरवादी जो होते हैं, वो अपनी कम्युनिटी के सामने दूसरी कम्युनिटी को देखना बिल्कुल पसंद नहीं करते। ठीक है, देखो, जो रिलीजियस फंडामेंटलिज्म होते हैं वो बेसिकली क्या करते हैं, जब भी उनके कोई अगेंस्ट जाता है वो ये चीज़ें बिल्कुल भी बर्दाश्त नहीं कर पाते। ठीक है, वो बेसिकली क्या ज़्यादा कोशिश करते हैं, आवाज़ और कलम को दबाने की वो सबसे ज़्यादा कोशिश करते हैं ताकि कोई भी उनके अगेंस्ट बोल ना सके। ओके, देखो, जो फंडामेंटलिज्म होते हैं वो बेसिकली अपने ही रूल्स रेगुलेशंस और लॉज में बिलीव करते हैं। जैसे खुमैनी के ईरान में शरिया ही वहाँ का कानून था। ठीक है, और तालिबान के अफगानिस्तान में भी कुछ ऐसे ही स्ट्रिक्ट लॉज बनाए गए थे जिनमें लोगों की भलाई बिल्कुल भी नहीं छिपी थी। जर्मनी में हिटलर और इटली में मुसोलिनी और सोवियत यूनियन में स्टॉलिन के वर्ड्स ही लॉज कहलाए जाते थे। तो एक फिलोसोफर थे जिनका नाम क्या था, बिटस्ट्रप। वो क्या लिखते हैं कि कट्टरवाद अपने फॉलोअर्स के दिमाग में नफरत भरने की बहुत ज्यादा कोशिश करता है। ठीक है, सो रिलीजन हैज बीन ट्रेडिशनली वन ऑफ द मेजर कंपोनेंट्स ऑफ नेशनल आइडेंटिटी एंड एट टाइम्स इट्स मोस्ट प्रोमिनेंट फीचर। Almost every state comprises of groups having faith in one religion or the other. Northern Ireland has Protestants and Catholics, Sri Lanka Christian, Tamils and Buddhists, Sinhalese, India Hindus, Muslims, Sikh, Christians and many others. And even in a particular religion there may be one set or the other, the Sunnis and the Shias. Among the Muslims, the Arya Samaj, the Sanatan Dharms and the Brahmins. Among the Hindus, for example. In addition to religious fundamentalism, as we have discussed before, there is, or what may be said, secularist fundamentalism. Fundamentalism is to be meant an uncompromising belief in the original and most basic thought frameworks of certain principles and a commitment to them. So, understood, totalitarianism in the form of fascism or communism amounts to fundamentalism. Religious fundamentalism and secularist fundamentalism have much in common: conviction in the basic principles, commitment to beliefs, and more or less. Right? A fanatical zeal in methods. Fundamentalism is not necessarily always religious, it may be non-religious as well. So, fundamentalism is rigid conformity to doctrines, and this may be religious or ideological or both. Now, fundamentalism is variously described by different scholars while emphasizing its one aspect or the other. This is why fundamentalism is religious as well as non-religious. Ideologically, fundamentalism may also be stated as one form of fundamentalism. Andrew Haywood, Political Ideologies, defines fundamentalism as a belief in the original or most basic principles of a creed, often associated with fierce commitment and sometimes reflected in fanatical zeal. The implications of the term fundamentalism from his definition are the belief either in the original creed or in its basic principles. Second, the belief takes the form of commitment and the original creed or in its basic principle. And the commitment takes the form of fanaticism. Alright. So the word creed, denoting the accepting system of beliefs, becomes more or less a religious term. If creed be taken as a religious concept, religious fundamentalists would therefore mean the belief in the original creed or in the basic principle of the creed together with commitment to those principles touching the boundaries of fanaticism. In this sense, any religion may take the shape of religious fundamentalism, Christian, Islamic, Hindu, and the like. To be a man of religion and to be a fundamentalist are not the same thing. As you know, for religion is not fundamentalism. Faith in religion does not amount to faith in religious fundamentalism. Religion implies a moral order, a sublime faith, and a spiritual end. So fundamentalism, and especially its religious aspect, is the perversion of religion. It is the exploitation of religion, sometimes open and sometimes subtle. It is a tactical means to the wicked, immoral end, converting religiosity into political, fanatical bellicosity. Now, fundamentalism is opposed to secularism, rationalism, humanism, and tolerance. It seeks to divide the civil society into numerous parts, pitting one against the other and preaching nothing but hatred. A fundamentalist knows his own religion and knows it in his own interest alone, and therefore to that extent does not even respect his own religion. A true follower of religion is not necessarily fundamentalist, rather a fundamentalist is anti-religious. A religious fundamentalist is one who projects his religious community as distinct and separate from the others. He gives precedence to his interest over the common interest. He perceives and deals with citizens not individually but religion wise. So, fundamentalism is a system of beliefs. So, is true about any ideology? If fundamentalism is regarded as an ideology of belief, if it is a system belief, it is also an ideology belief. So, in this sense, if there is this religious fundamentalism, there is also a non-religious fundamentalism. Say ideological fundamentalism, communist, fascism, liberalism, and to a degree even every ideology is also a system belief. Every ideology to that degree is fundamentalist. In every ideology, there are beliefs, theories, set of principles, foundational elements, followers who demonstrate faith as much as in any religion, and there are people who readily accept martyrdom. All these features can be seen in any religious fundamentalism as well. Now, ideology and fundamentalism. Ideologies are religious as religions are ideologies in their own right. Religion becomes a pin to fundamentalism when belief in it becomes unchallengeable and the other religions are made to appear separate from it. Ideology, like religion, is a belief system against which all other ideologies become false. There is thus a common feature working in both in ideology and religion, and it is a system of beliefs. Rigidity in beliefs leads to fundamentalism, both religious and non-religious. So basically, the relationship between knowledge and belief is indeed subtle, though the distinction between the two is very obvious. It is science that separates the two. Knowledge is all science, or science leads to knowledge. Belief is only faith, and faith is always unscientific. But when knowledge ends up in belief, ideology and religion transform themselves into fundamentalism. Ideological fundamentalism is as unscientific and bereft of knowledge as religious fundamentalism. When a religious precept says truth shall win, it is knowledge, but when a man from a religion says that what he is saying is the truth, it is belief and therefore has in it. सो बेसिकली जो फंडामेंटलिस्ट होते हैं वो साइंटिफिक चीज़ों पर बिल्कुल भी बिलीव नहीं करते, वो जो पहले से चीज़ें चलती आ रही होती है उन्हीं पर सिर्फ विश्वास करते हैं. ओके, so likewise Hitler, Mussolini or Stalin claim that their assertion alone is the gospel truth, and when they want all others to believe so, it is secular or non-religious fundamentalism. So faith in any form of fundamentalism is never questioned, and it stays beyond the reach of any reason and inquiry. So a fundamentalist of the religious type would never permit faith to be destroyed or what he thinks to be a faith. No ideology and no leader of any ideology would ever allow to get its tenets challenged. Ganguly faces of fundamentalist points, and rightly the result is that we decide about an invariant faith. Whenever discrepancies arise, we have to reinterpret, modify, ignore or destroy the sources of discrepancies. As fundamentals become an article of faith, changes in the ideological belief become impossible, and it then changes to fundamentalism. So neither any religious nor any non-religious fundamentalist can afford any dissent either of voice or word. Silencing of voice and pen is a significant pursuit of all forms of fundamentalism. With the development of ideological or religious thinking and the evolution of fundamentalism, a condition is created that is described by Aldous Huxley: at no period of world's history has organized lying been practiced so shamelessly. So, with the fundamental, God, Hitler, or Marx are never wrong. Fundamentalism need not be confused with revivalism. With the passage of time, there do arise rigidity and complexities in the evolution of any religion when attempts are made to modify rigid rules, or in the course of such movements new sects appear. They do not constitute fundamentalistic activities. So the rise of Buddhism and Jainism as a reaction to Hinduism Reformation movement, as a reaction to the Roman Catholic Church, or movements launched by the Muslim reformers cannot be labeled as fundamentalist movements. Okay, now core characteristics of fundamentalism. Fundamentalism, though used to frequently in the present day world, has never been clear in the minds of the people so far as its meaning is concerned. The word means different things to different people. At times, it is used in a deprecatory sense without assigning any clear-cut connotation. The word first received currency from a series of publications entitled The Fundamentals, published in the Limited States in 1909. Originally, it indicated a belief that the Bible, or for that matter, any holy book of any religion, is infallible, as it contains the words of God. So, a fundamentalist regards his own creed or religion or a system of belief to be necessary, sufficient, and eternally completely valid. One of the basic characteristics of fundamentalism is that it goes back to the original and to the definite sources and interprets them in its own words, asserting in the correctness of what the interpreter is saying. Basically, a fundamentalist position in this regard is that what he is saying is the correct interpretation of the original, or that the source meant what his interpretation is. A fundamental would not accept the opposite interpretation, nor would he like to change what he thinks to be correct. So, in his attitude, a fundamentalist is uncompromising in his nature. He is aggressive in his conviction. He is a fanatic. Ideology too has these features. Hitleric is a Hitleric, whatever be the circumstance. A liberal is a liberal, whatever be at stake. A communist is a communist, whatever be the temptations. Alright. So, doctrinal conformity is another characteristic or feature of all the fundamentalism. The fundamentalist conviction in the doctrine is unassailable. Its principles are inviolable, indefeasible, literal, and absolutely binding. Uh, you know, he's absolutely certain that the essential care of his beliefs capable of solving all problems. His faith is inherent, exclusive to all other ideologies, and thus self-sufficient and incommensurate with other philosophies or ideologies. So basically, Ganguly writes, we can clearly comprehend why revision is a deadly crime in communism and why apostasy is punishable by death in fundamental Islam. So, fundamentalist does not know the language of conversation, but only that of imposition. Believing in doctrinal correctness, a fundamentalist wants the rest of the society to conform to the doctrine. The fundamental, instead of participating in dialogue, control to deliberations, and do not hesitate to intervene, oftenly forcibly, to ensure that society is compelled to conform to the behaviors their worldview requires. Now, the belief that they are right without any question justify in their own minds, taking upon themselves the right to impose their point of view by force if necessary. Okay, so fundamental has its own doctrine, if not the creed. It seeks to institute harsh set of rules as political law. The Sharia, as in Khomeini's Iran's, becomes the law of the land. So was the case in the Taliban's Afghanistan. So was Hitler's word or Mussolini's word in Italy, a law in Nazi Germany, and that of Stalin in the former USSR, as one Mormon leader in the case of religious fundamentalists once said, and this is true about any non-religious fundamentalist as well. While addressing an audience of university students, do not think for yourself that thinking has already been there. A fundamentalist is never an audience, he is always a speaker. Chauvinism is another defining characteristics of fundamentalism. While a fundamentalist of a religious type talks in the name of God, he is one who denies himself the power of God. While he makes a full cry of equality, he is by nature a patriarch. While he claims all life based around faith, he declares all science to be wrong. While he pays a great deal of life based around faith, lip service to the ideals, he ignores them in practice, and occasionally, obviously, he contemptuous of them in private. He plays foul with religion ideology for which he claims to live and die if necessary. So, fundamentalism is always without a base. It starts with a conclusion and thereafter searches for evidence of support for the conclusion, and if the fundamentalist does not find any, he creates one. It is an evidence-less exercise. This sort of methodology is not exclusive to Christianity but can be seen in other religions too. The Christian fundamentalists are as non-scientific as the fundamentalists, Islamic, Hindu, and the like. So fundamentalism promotes ignorance. It does not permit why. The followers of Marx, whose life motto was challenge everything, do not give the concession to others, not even to the Marxists themselves. Bitster writes, fundamentalism all too often justifies in its adherent minds the prejudices, the zealotry, the intolerance, and the hate mongering that are all the most base of human instinct. So fundamentalist of any strife, he continues, is not progress, but rather I contend is the impedance of progress. Alright. Now, identity of secular and religious fundamentalism. So basically, fundamentalists either secular, say non-religious, or religious, negates science and nationalism. Every religion and every ideology thrive on belief system where reasoning has a very no place. It is therefore easier for some pseudo believers of any religion or ideology to turn to fundamentalism in order to seek the fulfillment of certain selfish interest. One need not not be a true believer to be religious. Pseudo Marxists need not be a true Marxist. So basically, it is not necessary that one has to believe in God to be called religious. Many religions do not believe in any creator deity. Buddhism, in its original form, did not postulate a creator deity. Buddhist Japan has no word for God. Confucius preached, if Confucianism is regarded a religion, it is basically a system of moral code of conduct. So is true about Taoism as well. Mussolini and Hitler were no regular visitors of any church. No Marxist believes in God, or for that matter in religion. Many scholars see in communism almost all the features of a religion. So the historian Tainobi says that a lasting contribution of Marx has been the historical reaffirmation of Christian moral conscience of Marxism. So Saint Augustine emphasized this through Christian theology. Marx did it through socialism. Russell has also shown that Marxism has the structure of a religion. It has a Yehweh, which is the dialectical materialism. The Messiah, that is Marx. The elect, that is the proletariat. The church, that is the Communist Party. It has the absolute source of mystery. Alright. He continues the dialectical materialism, the revelation in the form of historical laws and deterministic unfolding, and also it has its eschatology, that is the withering away of the state, the coming of the communist man, and the ultimate advent of trans-communism. So it is difficult to deny the scientific approach which Marx adopted. It is difficult to label Marx a utopian, especially when everyone knows his efforts at theorizing socialism as scientifically as possible. It is also difficult to refer to his theory as deterministic when all through he fought against determinism. But as his philosophy came down to his followers, they made it doctrinal, Lenin closing it to fundamentalism, and Stalin, after completing the progression, giving it the shape of a totalitarian doctrine. So fundamentalism and totalitarianism in the political context go together. This means that a fundamentalist has to be, by nature, totalitarian, aggressive in mood. A totalitarian, on the other hand, has to be a fundamentalist, as oppressive as he can. Hitler or Mussolini were totalitarians and fundamentalists. They were like fundamentalists, no friend of democracy nor any lover of rationalism. Okay. Now the fundamentalist mind. So, the fundamentalists are invariably doctrinal. As such, they are essentially uncompromising their doctrine of what they think that it is, admits no contradiction, no qualification of what they think is the truth, no betrayal of the essentials, and no compromise with the enemy, marking them anti-intellectual. See James Warner. A fundamentalist mind is one that does not permit the idea of unintended consequences to creep in. If anything happens, the happening must have a meaning. For a fundamentalist, the meaning is found in the intentions of the person who has caused the act. So, narrow as his thinking, narrowly as he perceives things, the fundamentalist never thinks beyond his own thinking. For those who think the other way, it becomes a moral matter of the fundamentalist to defend and furthermore impose his worldview over the opponents. So the fundamentalists seek to obtain support of the enemies, of ply enemies, consolidating the bad people. As Bruce says, the US fundamentalist Bruce explained do not see themselves set against an array of different groups operating with quite different and often incompatible agendas. The fundamentalists have always been enemies confronting them, or enemies always confronting fundamentally. For the US, fundamental communism is not a general political philosophy but is a single conspiracy. referring to the US fundament. Bruce writes, fundamentalists differ as to who is really behind it all. Some think that communists are really Jews, others think that Jews are really communists in the 1980s. With communism an obviously spent force and the Jews suddenly elected as allies. The US fundamentalists hit on a new collective noun for the various enemies. Secular humanists. The Iranian Ayatollahs suppose that US imperialists, Judaism, Zionism and Christianity are all the same evil thing. So the fundamentalists are always secretive. They are libidinal in coding and decoding science and discovering their hidden connections. There is a long tradition. Bruce tells us in Protestant fundamentalists in decoding allegorical Bible passages that the fundamentalists are close to a terrorist or that they themselves are terrorists is a well-known fact in the context of Indo-Pakistan relations. They are ready to provide an all-purpose legitimization, say jihad. In the case of Islamic fundamentalists is also the terms in other religious fundamentalists for almost any act. So fundamentalist one may therefore conclude grossly oversimplifies presence and underlying moral order to everything. Okay. Readily demonize its opponents and finds reds under every bed. Okay. Now comparing fundamentalism. See, religions like ideologies vary. They differ in their potential for believing fundamentalistic. The more monolithic a religion or ideology is, the more are the chances of its turning to fundamentalist Islam and the evangelical Protestant stand of Christianity are monolithic religions. They believe that there is just one God. They are also dogmatic. They believe it is possible to express his nature and will in specific proposition. Both these things are the necessary preconditions for fundamentalism. Hinduism as a religion in the context of Islam and Protestant Christianity as they are is less monotheistic and dogmatic and hence fundamentalist. There are a number of reasons for that. There is diffuseness in Hinduism, different deities, a variety of gods. So diffused is the society as well. So diffused is the society as well, a variety of traditions, groups. It may be Bruce say, better is described right as a religion but as a loose collection of religions. That of the Chauvinism, the Vaishnavas, the Shalkras, the Smarts and others that share some common themes but they tolerate a huge variety of expressions of these themes. Okay. So as those expressions can vary from village to village and caste to caste, there is a little scope for enforcing conformity, criticizing laxity, or vigorously rejecting moderate reconstructions of the tradition. Instead of the single Bible or Quran, there are a large number of holy books and holy traditions. So Hindu fundamentalism is rare and arises only when anti-Hindu fundamentalism challenges it. Within, it's a revivalistic. Attempts have been at work in Hinduism sometimes in the forms of Buddhism, Jainism or Sikhism at an early period of history or in the form of Brahmo Samaj, Arya Samaj, Ramakrishna Mission or Ved Samaj. During the greater part of the 19th century, orthodoxy has always been met with revelation Hinduism. To that extent, and arguably monotheistic religions such as Judaism, Christianity and Islam offer relatively more fertile soil for fundamentalists than Hinduism. And Protestantism and Islam have much in common. Their potentials are the same. Both can generate fundamentalism. Their aims are similar. Each wishes to assert the primacy of its religion's belief system and the patterns of behavior each belief system requires. But both differ in their methods. The Islamic fundamentalists believe that coercion is proper. Most of them believe that it is necessary as well, while others feel that it is required, declaring jihad literally. The Protestant fundamentalists do not believe so. Christ preached against the old law of eye for an eye and instead recommend to offer another cheek to the person who has already hit the first cheek. Though radical Protestants have created militant sects, the Protestants are relatively pacifist. Protestants and Islamists differ in their attitudes to toleration. By and large, the Protestants are tolerant while the Islamists are less so. The USA, for example, permits freedom of religious expression and attempts to prevent the state promoting one religion as superior to any other. So, as against this, most of the Muslim countries are far less tolerant, referring to this Bruce writes. Note that this is a matter of description and not value judgment. So, nothing about what I have said requires us to believe that permissiveness is better than authoritarianism. Differences in the two monotheistic religions can be cited in abundance, but that apart, what is more significant here is that Islamic fundamentalism is more potent and more severe than Christian fundamental. We can turn to them briefly. Christianity and politics, for most of the time, stayed apart. It became official religion of the Roman Empire in only AD 376, though it was officially tolerated from 60 years before, that is 313 AD. During the Middle Ages, the theory of the two of the swords kept two Roman temporal and ecclesiastical distinct from each other. Now, this is not to say that Christians are not religious. They are as religious minded as the followers of any other religions. Many of them live a lifestyle which is particularly godly. As you know, Bruce says, the core of Protestantism is correct belief, not correct action. Orthodoxy rather than orthopraxis. With the emergence of the modern state country after a century, Christianity remained aloof from the state, though most of the citizens in the Western nations were Christians. Christian fundamentalists in relation to the state and the law operate in a more legitimate manner and largely in secular countries. So Islamic fundamentalism is more pronounced, more vocal and more action oriented. From the beginning, Islam, unlike Christianity, remained political. The Prophet and the subsequent caliphs were both spiritual and political leaders. The founder of the Muslim Brotherhood and Islamic fundamentalist organization puts it as. So politics is part of religion. Kaiser and what belongs to Kaiser is for God Almighty alone. The Islamic fundamentalist promotes a lifestyle which is not only conformity to the creed, it demands actions also in conformity with what the fundamentalist wants. A hostage held by Hezbollah puts the case of Islamic fundamentalists, saying all our activities from the way we slept to the way we entered a lavatory were watched so that we could not violate the laws of Islam. Khomeini had written that no entering a lavatory, a believer must put his left foot forward first. We were taken to task for violating that rule. Bruce adds, for Islam, religion is a matter of obeying the holy law, as what God requires is obedience to the law. Then its imposition is not just acceptable but necessary. So most of the Muslim countries, especially in the Middle East, have not been able to shed their religion, which is Islam, despite all their efforts to westernize themselves. Islam for them is more than a religion. It is their eye. It is their way. The Islamic fundamentalists in relation to the state operate largely in theocratic countries and seek Muslim brotherhood and Islamic unity. So religion as a basic urge of mankind cannot be altogether ignored. But when it along with any fundamental ideology tends to get personalized in leadership, and when the latter speaks for religion while ignoring all reasoning, it becomes fundamentalism. Fundamentalism is not religion, it is the perversion of religion. देखिए धर्म को मानना बिल्कुल भी बुरा नहीं होता है, लेकिन जब सोच बहुत ज़्यादा कट्टरवादी बनती चली जाती है, जब हम साइंटिफिक चीज़ों को नहीं मानते हैं और रैशनैलिटी को पूरी तरीके से भूल जाते हैं, तार्किकता पर विश्वास नहीं करते, अपनी सूझबूझ का इस्तेमाल नहीं करते, तो वो जो सोच है वो बहुत ज़्यादा कट्टरपंथी बन जाती है। हम एक दूसरे के दुश्मन बन जाते हैं और किसी को कोई भी पसंद नहीं करता है और दुश्मनी जो है बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ने लग जाती है। Okay, so a fundamentalist is one who considers his religion separate from others, claiming its superiority. He is the one who has faith in what he thinks to be the creed. अपने ही धर्म को बहुत ज़्यादा सुपीरियर माना जाता है। जब आप एक फंडामेंटलिस्ट होते हो, आप जब कट्टरपंथी सोच रखते हो, तो आप अपने धर्म को दूसरों से अलग समझते हो और बहुत ज़्यादा उस चीज़ को, अपने धर्म को बहुत ज़्यादा अपर समझने लग जाते हो। ओके, और बाकी चीज़ों पे आप विश्वास नहीं करते। आप जो करते हो, आप जो सोचते हो, आप उसी पर विश्वास करते हो। इज द वन हु हैज फेथ इन व्हाट ही थिंक्स टू बी द क्रीड इंस्टेड ऑफ अ डिवोट ऑफ अ रिलीजन और अ फॉलोअर ऑफ एन आइडियोलॉजी, ही बिकम्स द स्पोक्समैन इट्स prophet and wants all the rest to conform. He is a doctrinal to the extent of an impositionist. He is an imposition to the extent of a terrorist. So fundamentalism of any type is extremism. It has as its strength all faith and no reason, all hatred for others and no compassion, all doctrinal conformity and no love. In the name of religion or say ideology, it does all that which is irreligious. All right. सिर्फ हेट की यहाँ पे जगह होती है, प्यार की बिल्कुल भी नहीं। ओके, यहाँ पे किसी भी रीज़न की ज़रूरत नहीं लगती है किसी को भी। जब कोई भी फंडामेंटलिज्म होता है या बहुत ही कट्टरपंथी सोच रखता है, इसे या तो एक आइडियोलॉजी भी आप कह सकते हैं, बहुत ज़्यादा अपने धर्म को लेकर आप बहुत ज़्यादा कट्टर हो जाते हो और दूसरे किसी भी धर्म या किसी भी कम्युनिटी को कुछ नहीं समझते हैं। तो इट डज ऑल दैट विच इज़ irreligious. It misinterprets the precepts and the original creed. It ill-educates the disciplines. All right. The fundamental of any type is rigid, uncompromising and aggressive. He never listens. He only speaks. जब कोई फंडामेंटल होता है तो कभी भी वो किसी की सुनता नहीं है, वो सिर्फ बोलता है। जो वो बोलता है वो सब सही होता है उनके अकॉर्डिंग, लेकिन वो किसी की नहीं सुनते हैं, भले ही वो कितना ही गलत क्यों ना कर रहे हो, लेकिन वो किसी की नहीं सुनते हैं क्योंकि उन्हें लगता है कि वो हमेशा सही होते हैं। उनकी जो कट्टरपंथी सोच होती है वो इस चीज़ को आगे बढ़ाती है। तो lie never follows, lie only guides. He himself becomes the teacher, the philosopher and the guide. He has more enemies than friends. He is secretive in his activities, more or less a misguided fellow. Fundamentalism has its base, its means and its objectives. Its base lies in untruth, its means are confined to violence and its objectives are to let terror rule the world. It arises from time to time, but it has never seen victory and would never do so. All right.